Welcome to Founded on Purpose, a podcast from Renew VC. I'm your host, Katie McBratney, and I'm so excited to have with us today in the guest seat a serial entrepreneur, an impact champion, and a fan of artists. I would say Navroze Mehta joining us from Vermont today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
We asked every guest the same 8 questions. None are trick questions. We're not trying to stump you, but really what we want to do is get an idea of the person behind the purpose, behind every business, especially purpose-led, social impact businesses. There is a person who saw the idea, who saw the need, and that's who we get to know on this show. So with no further ado, let's just jump in with question 1. Navroze, in one word, what is your purpose?
One word. I would say awareness of I guess it's one word. So I would say it's the main purpose is driving awareness.
I love that word. It also doesn't surprise me knowing what you do in one of your companies and the one that we met and got to collaborate over, Mela Artisans.
And I would say, thinking about it more deeply, if awareness to cause certain things, and I would say the other big word that comes to me is empowerment. It's empowerment of each of these artisan clusters who do not want a handout. They want to be empowered to do what they are great at doing. So awareness causing empowerment.
Ooh. It's like an equation.
Yeah. Because if people are aware of the talent and the ability to make change, then they become change makers. And so you can't have empowerment without more and more people becoming aware of what what talent and what heritage crafts and designs and skill sets are there. So I think they go hand in hand.
Piggybacking off of that, or maybe even slightly different. What was your most recent win? And that could be in business, any business. It could be personally. It can be something obvious, however you choose to define it, which is why I love this question.
I think the most recent win is we are working closely with brands who really would like to crack the code of sourcing from India from sustainable sources. And I think working and understanding that these brands are now becoming more and more aware that India is this immensely rich part of the world, that they could make their brands kind of triple bottom line sustainable brands like a Patagonia-like brand, and they can be like that and still be profitable is a big aha moment for many CEOs right now and many private equity firms. So the big win for me was meeting with some of these brands in LA recently and hearing that back saying, we are ready.
Okay, I have a question as someone who does not work in that world.
Yeah.
What does sustainable sourcing look like? I think people have an idea, just any layperson, of what sustainability is, but it's also kind of a relative term. And for people who don't work in retail, in intangible goods, and into that supply chain, what do we mean by sourcing in that context?
I think sustainable sourcing, there's also many ways. We talk about ethical sourcing. We talk about making sure that you know what where your product's coming from. You work with clusters that are paying a fair wage. So there's many different elements to it. So sustainability is one element of it, but it's a comprehensive list of what I would call socially impactful sourcing. So I think when you do that, it's different elements so if you're buying hard goods, you're buying sustainable products. You're working in an environment that's been compliant and has got all the social compliances completed, with means fair wages, appropriate, solutions and programs for their artisans in this case. And so from our perspective, it's more that question is an answer is more
Sure.
comprehensive, and and using organic cotton, for example, like those are all using mango wood, which is which if you are foresting it, it's reforested. There's a program to invigorate the forest. So all of those are very well thought through programs that need to be in place, and that's what sustainability and doing sourcing ethically and impactfully is all about.
Which we've talked about this as we've collaborated with Mela and Renew. Consumers are wanting more of that, and at the same time, they can buy it and they can support those brands, but at the same time, they aren't the ones sourcing the products. And so having these conversations from folks like you and CEOs about how not just meeting customer demand, because of course CEOs want to make a profit. That's the game, right? But also meeting that consumer need that is rooted in care and wanting to support things that are good for the planet, that are good for people. And it all kind of comes together. So it's really heartening to hear that your win was in service of that.
Yes, exactly. And it takes, I think it takes many different things to happen for a large, like this case was a $350 million public company, to come to that realization that our customers want this and we better pay attention. And I think that was very heartening to see. So I think it shows the power of a brand like that. Mela can have an overarching influence over many brands and allow something catalytic to happen.
We love that. We love that. All right. So question 3, what is the biggest single missed opportunity in your field?
I think the biggest single missed opportunity is kind of what I had mentioned before, is brands going after fast fashion. It's very difficult to do what we are doing. It's not easy. It's taken 14 years for us of hard work building this network. There's not a lot of appreciation from capital, as we found out, to appreciate this and support heritage crafts and even though consumers are screaming for it. Consumers are wanting what we are offering, but it's been negated by cheap products, fast fashion, that is now slowly starting to have the generation that's coming. The millennials started this. They initiate.
We got one thing right. We will take it.
Yeah, exactly. I like both of those. But the millennials absolutely got it right, because they shop with purpose. And I think you can talk for yourself. I can talk for my daughter, Sonali, who gets a lot of credit for starting and founding Mela, by the way. It was her idea when she was in India working on this. I think her friends, everyone, they look at the label, they check what the material is, and like I'm sure you do, you will buy something and you'll pay more for something that has a purpose. And so I think it's very important to tell that story. So the missed opportunity is that not moving faster. Not there being not more, and I don't mean to keep using Patagonia, but I do use them as my big kind of a beacon of how to get things right. There should be more Patagonia. Like there should be a premium that people should be, they should pay, and that brands should be given that motivation and that license to take a risk and do more of what we are suggesting they do.
So much to chew on there. I'm like, my wheels are turning, but I'm going to keep the questions going because I think we're going to pull on some more of those threads as we go.
Okay.
When was the last time you were wrong?
Well, every day. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a definite what's right or wrong, like you said, so I think you learn from it. It's not, I mean, I don't look at it being wrong. You sometimes may not get it right, is the way I look at it. And the key is to acknowledge it and admit it and learn from it and move on. So I think there's, I did a license, there's there are things that I've got wrong in a big way sometimes, where you do a licensing deal and you say, a year later, it's like, what the heck? Why did I do that?
But that's so human. And I think that's the thing that
Yeah.
for folks who maybe are new to entrepreneurship or who have never been in conversations with chairs of the board, with founders, with entrepreneurs that they view as successful, like you are and how you've been successful in your different businesses. And there's this assumption that they know it all and they never make mistakes or get something not right. And I so appreciate that framing, and also you having the awareness to say, like, I'm human. Of course, there's something that wasn't 100% right.
No, you learn a lot from, I can say there were so many, learnings along the way on Mela, so many things you look, but I think the key is to acknowledge, to learn not to make the same mistake twice, because that can be, then it starts becoming expensive, but to learn from your mistakes but always be looking ahead. That would be my suggestion, is like, if you keep, regretting, looking in the back rearview mirror, I don't think that's productive in my point of view. Again, I'm not being judgmental, because some people like to be very analytical and study there. But to me, it's like, I think sometimes being an entrepreneur, you have to be pretty optimistic and pretty forward thinking. And I tend to be like that. Like, okay, well, that happened. Wasn't great. We made a mistake. Let's learn from that and move on.
My good friend Emily, she's been leading the company she founded for over a decade, she calls it pathological optimism. It's almost to the point of delusion. You have to be reasonable, right? We live in a real world. There are real constraints, real consequences. But to be an entrepreneur, and it certainly tracks to my experience as a founder and working side by side with founders, that optimism, I agree with you. I think the optimism carries you through so much.
Yeah.
The good and the bad, it helps carry through those mistakes or those learnings or things that didn't go as planned, but it's also wind in the sails when things are going well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think you have to, and I think it's also for the team. The team wants to have a leader that's not delusional. I think that's probably going a little too far, but I think like pathologically optimistic is a good term. It's like,
so I'm like, give her credit, because I did not come up with that. But it's almost true. You have to believe, because it is hard. You get told no. You face obstacles to capital. Things like, I don't know, a global pandemic happened, and you just have to figure it out.
Yeah, we have to figure it out. We had to, like, that's a great example. The global pandemic happened. We had containers that we had POs for from huge billion-dollar companies that canceled. Even though they were like, so what does Mela do? Like, many brands obviously like folded because they didn't have any option. And but in India, when we have half our team in India or more, it really wasn't an option to fold. What would these amazing like employees who've been with us for sometimes 5-10 years. So we all got together, we used Zoom to its maximum, and we said, you know what, we're going to make this whole company an Amazon, centric kind of, because we had always had that on our to-do list. It's just an example of using all of our resources to take a very catalytic, an event that was very like significant and severe, and change it into an event that makes something good come out of it. So everyone got on a Zoom every day for half an hour and had a task. Even if they were not skilled in graphic design, they learned graphic design, and they did something to make every hundreds of SKUs of Mela ready to be put on Amazon. And that was our mission every day. And like, that's how we kept going, because there was nothing else to do. There were no orders, no customers to talk to. And we said, okay, well, we'll come out of this with a completely Amazonified company, and it'll give us another major channel which we wouldn't have had before. So that's how, and we did, actually.
And then you've got all these people who are now, many of whom, working from home, spending so much time at home, looking around saying, I actually want something that I care about and that means more and is more sustainable. So you've got customers kind of primed while you're also diversifying your channels and leading with that optimism that the world was bound to reopen.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly happened. So we were right on that. Good one, optimists. And then you ended up with something that you had wanted to do already and puts you in a different position now.
Yeah. And I think it's appreciated everyone behaved like a family and like supported each other. And we didn't have to lay off a single person during the entire pandemic. And I think it was, people then when it's tough times later will also pitch in and know that you have their back. So I think that's what's important. More so, it's more for empathy. Like, I think if there's one important word that comes out of all of these learnings, it's like be empathetic, have empathy. Many like leaders or like they act like it's a thing of strength to not be empathetic, but I think that's insane to me. I mean, I think I think it's a cornerstone of leading a fruitful life is first of all teaching your kids empathy and then being empathetic yourself, of course.
Yes, I feel like I'm with you. I feel like turning off empathy when you clock in is turning off a piece of being human.
Yeah.
And how can you expect to be a good leader if you're turning off that piece of you that allows you to relate to others and see opportunities instead of being opportunistic?
But look at the C-suite now. There's so many quote unquote of these bombastic leaders who like are clearly not empathetic, and they're proud about like firing people and like doing that. And like, okay, look, you may have to do certain things in life, but you can still have empathy when you do it. And that's it's a trait. And look, I'm not stating anything new, but I think it's something that's lacking.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely cultural. I could go down a whole rabbit hole on this, which I will try not to. But there are cultural and conditioned ideas about empathy, about vulnerability, about transparency, and even emotion. And I can just say that we will not likely have any non-empathetic leaders on this show. Okay, question 5. We're past the halfway mark. What hill would you die on? What's a belief, a tenet, something that is just something that you're like, no matter what, I can argue anybody into this. I believe this wholeheartedly. Nobody can convince me otherwise.
I mean, it has to be integrity. You have to have no gray areas where integrity is concerned. I mean, I feel it has to be, because you have to sleep at night black and white, where it comes to important elements of what's your guiding principles. I think people get on a slippery slope when they say, well, that's okay. To me, I've been able to do that where like it's black and white. Like I keep my, that's how it's all what my reputation is built on, what I sleep, well at night, because you have to have high integrity in everything you do in your relationships and trust, so you trust people until they teach you not to, And so I think integrity and trust is a very cornerstone for me to like in terms of relationships.
How does that tie back to some of the things you said about empathy and optimism? How does that play with the idea that integrity is a non-negotiable?
I think they all go hand in hand, obviously, but I think empathy is, I think, a different kind of emotion to integrity is a cornerstone of like, it shouldn't even be thought about. It's like it's part and parcel. Being empathetic is something that you either as a child that value, and you can teach empathy. I think that's true. And I've done, by the way, in YPO, we've had speakers come and talk to our CEOs about empathy. So I think people can be more aware of how to be empathetic, but generally you get taught that as a kid, I feel it's the values your parents or whoever brought you up teach you. I think integrity is the same way. Like, you learn from your surroundings and you learn from your leaders and your parents. So I think if you got good role models who say, no, this is not right. And I don't care how much money you make. No, you don't do it. I think it's all it goes hand in hand with that. So you said empathetic, and what was the other one?
Optimism. But I think you also hinted on that a little bit with what you said about trust, right? So you can trust someone until they prove you otherwise requires a bit of optimism.
Correct. No, you believe in people. like you let them prove your. I mean, I think sometimes it's hard to like sometimes some people are so difficult to understand or so different from you that it's hard to be optimistic about them, but you have to let them prove you wrong, like that they have. So I try that, but I can't say I'm always successful, and so it's difficult. But optimism, I think, obviously you want your optimism to not, like, you don't want to go over the line of allowing your optimism to not be truthful, either. So I think you have to be careful about that, because then you'd lose your integrity.
That's a great point. And you mentioned this a little bit when you talked about, making a decision to draw a line and choosing integrity over, for example, profit. And that leads me to this next question, and there's some interesting threads there, because we are in an always-on world. Your products like Mela, for example, is on Amazon, is on your website. People can buy them literally any time of day, which means you can monitor the business any time of day, which means you could always be on a screen. You could always be obsessing over the numbers. And we really believe, in one of the things that drew me to this team at Renew is this idea that we need play. That if we only obsess and focus on the work, one, we're missing out of being a part of being human. But two, the work will actually suffer because we are so narrowly focused. We're not getting any other inputs. We're not getting any other joy, any creativity, any other data that might influence how we work. So I'm curious how you play. What does the play look like for you, even outside of the office or, within work?
Yeah. I mean, for me, my biggest kind of downtime is tennis, for example. So I play tennis 4 or 5 times a week, play a lot of tennis, and I also bike and I hike, and actually it's also family time, like with my wife, my kids. When I'm in India, like, I spend a lot of time with both my daughter and my son, and I think those are all very kind of joyous, fun times for me. And also spending time with friends. I mean, I'm very social. I love going out to dinner with like all of our friends. So I think it's a combination of all of that. So I like to work hard, but I also like the downtime. So when I'm in a tennis, I don't check my phone. Like, I switch off and I just play tennis, and enjoy that kind of complete separation. Difficult to do. I can't say I'm successful, and my wife would argue that I don't do it very well. So, like, there's definitely...
We are all a work in progress.
I know.
Well, and I love that there are some elements in hearing what you do and these practices that you have to integrate play. There's movement, there's skill, there's artistry involved. I've played tennis. There is an art and a science to it. There's getting outside. There's being social, getting around people that aren't just professional contact.
Yeah.
So, like, weaving that together, it's really beautiful how you've kind of woven a tapestry of different things to keep your cup full, while also you still can uphold the boundaries and the responsibilities of building a really successful and purposeful business.
Right. And I think travel and cultural touch points, new cultural touch points are huge for me. It just keeps me very alive in meeting new people and seeing people with amazing skills, whether it be in Mexico or in Indonesia or in Vietnam or in India. It's that discovery is so invigorating. And so just traveling all over the world is during the pandemic, that's the thing I missed most. I didn't leave the country for a year and 3 months, and that's the longest I've not been outside this country in 30 years.
You've been building Mela Artisans for 14 years. It's not your first company. It's not your second, and I don't think it will be your last. You make up some of the rules of those businesses, and everyone has opinions and best practices. So how do you know what advice to take and what advice to say thank you and move on?
I mean, look, there's always, the way I look at it is when I talk to people or CEOs, and I belong to, I think I told you, this group called YPO. So I'm in touch with a lot of good very successful CEOs. So in my opinion, there's always learnings to be had, from learning how people run their companies. So I never feel like I have the right answer to everything. But I do feel that over years, I like systems and solutions that have worked for me. And I tend to be a broadcaster. If something's really working for me, I like to tell other CEOs. Like, for example, there's a system called EOS, or it's called Entrepreneur Operating System. It's a pretty, you've not heard of it, it sounds like, but maybe there's a lot of people who have. It's not that uncommon. I found it to be a real success for Mela. It's a great kind of common language. So I've told a lot of CEOs about it. Similarly, like there are, a lot of learnings that I've had from other CEOs, but there are many things that on the flip side that people will say, well, I have this type of a system, I do this, and it's a rigor that I like, and it's not for me. It's not how I would run my company. So I disregard those type of, it may be great for his management style or her management style, but certainly doesn't resonate with how I would run a company. But I think there are some guiding principles that I think are valuable, when you do this. I think I believe that having an open system where everyone can speak and have very short meetings, ideally even stand-up meetings when you had an office. People should always be able, like flat organization where people can speak their minds, especially in organizations like ours, which are very purpose-driven. You don't want to stifle. But then one guiding rule that I've always had is that, okay, you listen to everything, but you be decisive. You make a decision, and then everyone gets on that bus. Where dysfunction happens is where people then say, well, I didn't agree with that. But then you get off the bus. The point is you got a chance, everyone debates it, you then move forward. You make a decision, and everyone then has to rally around that decision. I think what becomes dysfunctional is if you tolerate a lot of continuing dissent, whatever, because if someone feels very strongly, then they might have to leave the company, because if they feel that strongly, then they should, or they have a private discussion, you thrash it out, talk about, but they should not be open. That's where I think what causes, I'm talking broadly in terms of management styles, that's what causes a lot of dysfunction in companies, is when there's not decisive, when first of all, you don't allow people to truly be open and understand that their ideas may get to the finish line or they may not, because they may not be the best thing for the company. But however, they should feel that they're always being fairly listened to, and that they are being considered. If they don't get that, if they just feel you're paying them lip service, then that's a failed, exercise.
There's that empathy and that integrity showing up again.
Yeah, it's the integrity of like saying, yeah, I'm really listening to you. And I feel that I've learned to be a better listener. People are not good listeners in general, so it's a very difficult skill. So being able to listen to someone and get their point of view and get their point, and especially the ones who are very, skeptical, I love them to speak up, because they are my counterbalance to my optimism. So I have to hear them. Otherwise, you fall and make a bigger mistake. So I think getting that and then making a decision and being decisive, I think if people keep waffling, then the company becomes just as dysfunctional as if they do make a decision. And then, so I think those are some of the more important things. I'm going by one kind of principle that I've run my companies by.
No, I really like that. I'm a fan of flat organizations and openness. And for me personally, and people who have worked with me know this is not a new phenomenon, but I operate by a yes and principle. So when we have disagreements, I want to talk it out. I want to understand where you're coming from, because I might be wrong, or our ideas might be better together. And I think that there's this, back to that black and white and that binary thinking, this idea that there is a right answer and a wrong answer. But ultimately, when you have open communication and healthy communication on a team that is action oriented and leads to a decision, it can help anchor folks in the idea that we are on the same team. We want the same outcome. It's not about my idea being best and yours being worse, or mine being right and yours being wrong. We want the best idea, the best direction to emerge. And so that's a tool that I use, is instead of no, but, which is me advocating for no, not what you said, but what I say.
Yeah.
It's a good way to say, like, yes, I hear you. And this is what I have in response to that, or in relation to that, to kind of move the conversation and the decision forward, while also trying not to make it adversarial and add tension to what can be a very passionate discussion, especially in purpose-led companies, which we're rounding, getting close to home base. I came up with a baseball analogy and it fell apart in my brain. It's okay. I am authenticity all the time, so I will admit that. Last question. Choosing to start a company is a big decision. It's hard work. Choosing to work and to give not just your time and talents, sometimes capital, relationships, all of that towards a purpose is an added layer of difficulty. So, question 8, the final one of the podcast. So what is your least favorite thing about your job, and what is the best part of what you do?
I'd say the worst thing about the job is not having more time in the day to spend more time in working with all aspects. For me, because I'm running multiple companies. I've got 3 different companies that I'm the chairman of. So not having that time, to me, I would have to say, is the one that bothers me the most. Is like I've probably, and so and in dealing with the consequences of that, and also like things that are kind of out of your control that you don't believe are, that you might have been able to solve if you had a little more time or whatever, that bother you. So that's anything that's out of your control causes you more stress, obviously. So I think, and the best part of it is actually the people, and solving great problems, but also coming up with great solutions with people you love working with. I have a great rule now that I don't really work with people that I don't enjoy anymore. Mm-hmm. I can afford to do that. So I don't believe in spending my, life short, and you want to work with people you really enjoy. So I keep that guiding principle. And so everything I do, I really enjoy, so that's the best. The best part is like having a mission, and like whether it be in my healthcare companies working on getting a screener for colorectal cancer that saves lives, or whether it's Mela changing the ecosystem and the empowerment paradigm for artisans in India. I think whatever that might be, you want to leave a footprint that's meaningful. And I feel if you're doing that and you're changing, you're making a difference, I think that's what's the most gratifying and motivating part. And you're doing it with people you have fun doing it with.
That summed up the people who are part of our community and who listen to this podcast and who find ways to work together or to learn from each other. I think you summed that up so beautifully. And I can say that it is fun to work with you as someone who has. And thank you for the candor, and thank you for the transparency. It's this podcast is a little deviation from the norm, which is part of my purpose, is to ask questions. So thank you for allowing me to ask questions and giving some of your precious time to share with all of us here. We will be sure to link to Mela Artisans in the show notes. Where's the best way to follow what you're doing across all of the different purposes that you're serving?
Mela Artisans can be certainly followed at melaartisans.com. And our work I'm doing a lot of work in colorectal cancer screening, etc. That can be followed on newdaydiagnostics.com. And generally, you could follow me on LinkedIn. And if anyone wants to keep in touch with me personally, they can always email me, of course, also at nmehta@melaartisans.com.
Thank you again. And for everybody out there, let's keep working hard, caring hard, and working towards more purpose.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.